Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. I'm delighted to welcome you to our update on our area Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Framework, Area SEND. I'm going to do a little bit of introductions, go through the agenda, and then we'll get started. The Area SEND framework is a joint framework with the Care Quality Commission, CQC, and Ofsted, so I'm really pleased that we've got colleagues from across both those organisations with us today. So we'll do some introductions. My name's Claire Stewart. I'm Deputy Director at Ofsted, responsible for inclusive education, and then I'm going to hand over to Tina.
Hi everyone, I'm Tina Pagett. I'm one of His Majesty's Inspectors and I'm a Specialist Advisor for SEND and AP, and I've been leading on the Area SEND framework, and I also inspect and lead these inspections and quality assure them. Jess.
Hi there, good afternoon everyone. My name's Jess Taylor-Beirne. I'm one of the Children's Services Managers in CQC, and so as part of our role we work alongside Ofsted in reviewing the framework and reviewing the inspections, but also, like Tina, very much involved in inspection activity and quality assurance as well.
Thanks, Jess. Hi, I'm Julie Knight. I'm one of His Majesty's Inspectors. I'm a Specialist Advisor for SEND for social care. I also take part on the inspections as part of the Area SEND framework and the quality assurance of those inspections.
Thanks, Julie. And then we're joined by Robbie as well, who's going to just introduce himself.
Thanks, Claire. Hi, everybody. My name's Robbie. I am the policy lead in the inclusive education team at Ofsted, and today I'm supporting my colleagues with the Q&A section of this webinar. Back to you, Claire.
Well, thanks everyone. So if we just pop on and we'll have a little look at the agenda and then we'll get cracking. So we are going to be talking you through the Area SEND review that we've jointly undertaken and the reasons why we decided to do that. We'll share a little bit with you about what we've heard and what we're doing as a result of those things that we've heard. And then we'll also share some of the inspection findings from the first 2 years of the Area SEND renewed framework. And then there's some time for questions at the end as well. Thanks to those of you who've submitted questions in advance. We'll get through those. And you can also submit questions through the session as well. So please do continue to do that, and Robbie will be answering some of those in the chat, and also we'll pick them up at the end as well. We'll move into the main agenda now. Then what we will do as a panel is turn our cameras off just to kind of help with people's bandwidth and to enable everyone to concentrate on the content, and then we'll pop them back on at the end for the Q&A. Thanks everyone, and I'm handing over to Julie, I think.
Yeah, thank you very much, Claire. So first we're going to talk about our review of the Area SEND inspection framework. So just a little bit about who we are. We are Ofsted and the Care Quality Commission. In our Area SEND inspections, we work closely together. The SEND framework was co-produced together jointly, but also alongside stakeholders, including children, young people, and parents and carers. And together, Ofsted and CQC, we inspect local areas to assess whether partners in health, education and social care are working jointly to improve the experiences of children and young people with SEND and their families. So Ofsted launched the Big Listen last year, and through this we heard about improvements that parents and carers, children and young people and the sector would like to see to our framework, but also their frustration with the system. In our response to the Big Listen, we committed to reviewing Area SEND inspections. The findings from this review were published on the gov.uk website on the 6th of June this year. Thank you to all of those who provided response and sharing your views as part of this Big Listen. And thank you to those of you joining us today who have provided feedback and information as part of the review process. So the objectives for the review were to enhance the experiences of inspections for children and young people, families and local area partnerships. It was also to improve our reporting, to be clear about our findings from those inspections, and also to understand how our workforce, the inspectors, can continuously be developing skills, knowledge and experience and their expertise through training. In the review, we focused on how we can enhance the existing framework through a series of carefully considered updates, but without introducing major changes, while we know that the DfE are considering bigger reforms to the system. The review focused more directly on engagement meetings, monitoring inspections, and certain elements of our full inspection practice, so the information that we ask for as part of the inspection process, and also how we enhance the skills and training and the expertise of our workforce, of those inspectors, to capture what we have heard from inspections to date, and also as part of that Big Listen process. And there are various areas of the framework that were not included in the review, just to make that really clear. So we didn't make fundamental changes to the inspection cycle, so the timeliness of when inspections happen, the inspection teams themselves, and also the evaluation criteria that's in the framework. So who we spoke with as part of this review, we had 26 external events. We engaged with children and young people, parents and carers, family representative groups, including parent and carer forums and charities. We also spoke and heard from professionals working in education, health and social care, and representative groups from different sectors. And we also surveyed our own inspectors that complete the inspections, and we held roundtable events with colleagues from Ofsted and from the Care Quality Commission. So what we heard and what we are doing, I'm going to hand this over to Jess, who's going to talk you through some of the feedback that we've received. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. So we can see, against the objective of how we enhance the experience of inspections for children and young people, their families and the local area partnerships, the main headlines we heard were that children, young people and families want more opportunities to share their experiences with inspectors, and also that inspections are resource intensive for the local area partnerships and could be more supportive. So if we give you some more specific examples and look at what we heard from parents, carers, children and young people, we did receive feedback, some positive feedback about our focus on the experiences and the views of children, young people and their families, and also that we include a social care inspector within the inspection team. But parents, carers, children and young people told us that they would like more opportunities to share their experiences with inspectors, and some children and young people said they could better prepare if they knew what inspectors would ask during meetings, and that we could also improve the accessibility of the survey and how widely that it's circulated. They also told us while the purpose of engagement meetings could be clearer, they did provide a valuable opportunity to bring the partnership together to reflect on and discuss the impact of their arrangements on children and young people with SEND and their families. And those engagement meetings that are hosted jointly by CQC and Ofsted, families, parents, carers did feel that those meetings with the local area partnerships had improved co-production in relation to local decision making and to help keep a spotlight on SEND as well. There were concerns raised that sometimes local area efforts are focused on being ready for a range of inspections, which might be taking their resources away working directly on the area's challenges. So we very much heard that. And then if we look at what we heard from local area leaders, so some more specific examples were that inspections do take up an awful lot of time, and this has an impact on those leaders' ability to carry out their day-to-day work, and that pressure from inspections could be eased by reducing the amount of duplication in documents and discussions in meetings. But they did also tell us about those engagement meetings providing an effective opportunity to bring the partnership together, but the purpose of them could be clearer and the content. They also wanted more clarity about the data requested during the inspection, because this would help them to upload the most accurate information, and that inspectors should focus on feedback they receive from families about more recent experiences of children and young people with SEND. So in response to hearing those things, and especially hearing that children, young people and their families want more opportunities to share their experiences, for our monitoring inspections, so for those areas that have had an outcome of systemic weaknesses, when we go back to do the monitoring, we've ensured that inspectors will have more time on those inspections to be able to hear the voices of children, young people and their families. We've also provided more opportunities to engage with inspectors during the full area send inspections as well. We're also looking at making the surveys more accessible and effective. For example, we will provide our survey links directly to family and children representative groups to support how the surveys are circulated. And we're also going to better communicate how children, young people and their families can share their views and really increase the focus on recent experiences with inspectors. And so in response to the local areas views being with the inspections being resource intensive, we have simplified the data that we ask for. That doesn't mean we're asking for less information than we would usually. We're just simplifying it down and using existing reporting mechanisms and existing data collection and reports where available. And that's all clarified in the handbook. An example of that is with the Annex A data requests with health commissioning templates. We've just clarified the information that we want on there in relation to referral pathways, for example, and waiting times as well. Some other things that we've done is around making the engagement meetings more reflective and proportionate. So the new inspection handbook has got more clarity on the purpose of those meetings. And we're going to better target our engagement meetings to support the local areas. That was something we heard really strongly from parents and carers, that the frequency of engagement meetings will be based on the partnership's most recent area send inspection outcome. To give a bit more context to the engagement meetings, if we can move on, thank you. So with the engagement meetings, the main intention is to discuss the partner's self-evaluation and send action plans and how they measure the impact on the experience and outcomes of children and young people with SEND and their families, and also to discuss any concerns or changes to the local SEND system and how leaders are addressing them. So the meetings are going to be focusing on the content of the SEF, of that self-evaluation, the action the local area leaders are taking to address areas for improvement or area for priority actions, what local areas are doing to maintain or improve good practice, how leaders are monitoring the impact of their actions, any emerging local or national SEND issues that might impact the delivery of services, and also where appropriate the current area SEND thematic topic as well we'll be looking at in engagement meetings. So then if we move on to our second objective, which was around improving the clarity and impact of our reporting, we heard that our reporting should provide more detail about the outcomes and clearly assign responsibility to the partner who will address any areas for improvement or those areas for priority action. So to give some more insight into what we heard, parents, carers, children and young people told us that they had concerns that sometimes their views were underrepresented, particularly when the outcome of an inspection was positive in a way they felt didn't reflect their individual experience. Some found reports had too much detail and were difficult to understand. Others wanted more detail, including more transparency about findings and the basis for outcomes. And local area leaders from education, health and social care told us that Ofsted and CQC should do more to acknowledge that partnerships are working in a challenging national context. They expressed concerns about being held responsible for issues beyond their control. More information about the themes identified in the inspection surveys would help to support their strategic planning. And we heard that from across the sector, examples of good practice we include in our reports does help to identify strategies to improve support, and therefore we should provide more examples. And many people across the sector said that our reports should clearly assign that responsibility for areas of improvement, so similar to what parents said as well. So as a result, and things we'll be doing moving forward is, where appropriate, specify which member of the partnership should take forward these areas for improvement or areas for priority action, explore how we can make our reports more accessible for children, young people and their families. We're going to be sharing a summary of our survey findings with local area partnerships and the family representative groups to support strategic planning. So it won't be published wider, but it will be shared with those family representative groups plus the partnership as well. And in the longer term, following the wider improvements to Ofsted education inspections, when this first cycle of inspections finishes in December 2027, we're going to be exploring the introduction of a report card for these area send inspections as well. So that's something for the future when this round of inspections has finished. And then against the third objective, which was around continuously developing the knowledge and skills of our area send workforce, we heard that given how complex these inspections can be, that inspectors would benefit from additional enhanced training. So some of the things that we heard was around that we heard some positive feedback around how inspectors engaged during inspections with children and young people by speaking directly to them and their families. Many respondents valued the collaborative approach that inspectors working and that their professional insights do help to drive further changes. But we also heard that across the area send inspection teams, a need for a more comprehensive understanding across education, health and social care altogether as well. Children and young people told us that they felt comfortable talking with our inspectors, meaning they could share their thoughts on what was working well for them and how support could be improved. But that inspector training should provide a firmer understanding of how family representative groups function and how they can support inspections, but also how this might vary across areas. Leaders told us about the training should include further legislative underpinning of the framework to help form that real understanding of the entire send and partnership system as a whole. And that includes having experience of whole system working and leadership, and that inspectors need to have a robust knowledge of national issues and contexts within which the local area partnership operates. So as a result of this, and I think it's just important to note that already our inspectors are all recruited with send experience, depending on health, social care or education. All of them will have experience working within the send system directly. They go through a fairly intensive training program as well, with a couple of days of intense training plus extra events throughout the year. In response to the feedback, we are still going to increase the frequency of training for new and existing inspectors. So like I said, that can carry on throughout the year, and enhancing the training that we currently deliver. So it's something we'll be looking at over the summer. And starting in the autumn term, we'll be introducing refresher training for our inspector workforce as well, to ensure that inspectors really do understand, in addition, the monitoring inspection methodology, because that's something that's included in this update as well. Ofsted will also be exploring forming a national pool of education inspectors. This is an approach already used by Ofsted Social Care and CQC, with the hope of it increasing the consistency and expertise within our inspection teams. And of course, working with the new Ofsted Academy to continue recruiting Ofsted inspectors and also HMIs, His Majesty inspectors, with, like I said, relevant experience in send alternative provision, as well as recruiting colleagues who work in local area partnerships. A number of our inspectors as well also have lived experience, which we think is quite important as well. I think I'm going to hand over to Tina now to talk a bit about our inspection findings over the first 2 years of the framework. Thank you, Tina.
Thanks, Jess. So at the end of May, we had published 62 reports, inspection reports, and around 25% found that local area send arrangements typically lead to positive experiences and outcomes for children and young people with send. And recognising that we're not in a perfect system, but in those areas, the recognition of what work needed to do was remaining, and plans in place for that work. Around 50% led to inconsistent experiences and outcomes, and around 25% that there were widespread and or systemic failings. And that data has been fairly consistent throughout this cycle under this framework of around sort of 50% inconsistent and 25% typically positive and widespread and or systemic failings. By the end of this term, we will have inspected half of the local area partnerships. We've got live inspections going on and reports that have yet to be published. So we are absolutely on track to conclude this first cycle of inspections in 2027, as Jess mentioned earlier. We do want to acknowledge the current changes, particularly in ICBs, the ongoing local government reforms to the SEND system. We're commissioned by the DFE and committed to continuing to delivering the Area SEM frameworks. It's really important to shine that light on the experiences and outcomes of children and young people with SEND and families. And we want to reassure you of that. But we will continue to work with sensitivity around those local areas where there is that ongoing change and uncertainty in people's roles, particularly around the ICBs. But we will be continuing to inspect. So alongside the review that you will help to contribute towards, we have reviewed the first 2 years of published reports, and we always do that with a new framework so that we can learn from that and share the learning from that. And that's something that came through during the review, that particularly local area partnerships are really keen to hear, what's working well and what isn't for other areas. And so we've published that report. We'll share that link at the end. So it's to help inform any future improvements to the system, and as I said, highlighting those examples of effective practice and identifying and recognising the challenges. We do recognise the SEND system is under significant pressure. Some of the factors that contribute to this pressure we know are outside of the control of any one local area. In our inspection reports, we consider areas where leaders do have the power to bring about positive change, and where they are really facing those national barriers. So the reports highlighted 8 broad themes of both stronger and weaker practice, and that was kind of consistently emerging through the reports that we published in the first 2 years.
So if we just go through some of them. So around strong oversight, co-production, joint commissioning arrangements, for example, inclusion strategies that had been co-produced with families and parent carer forums as equal partners, that really varied in areas. And so in relation to that strong oversight, co-production, those joint commissioning arrangements, where we would often see some areas using feedback from children and young people to help inform those commissioning arrangements. But again, that was inconsistent between areas. In relation to multi-agency working, some local area partnerships were working collaboratively and sharing information to understand the needs. And where that happened, services were well coordinated, the commissioning was effective as well. In terms of identification and supportive practice, we saw some really good things around that effective identification and early help, such as communication advisory services, family hub drop-ins, and indeed the early help and identification of need theme was identified as an area for improvement in the smallest proportion out of all of the areas. But it was also a key area for priority action in about 1/3 of the local areas that received the outcome of widespread and/or systemic failings. Sometimes we saw some really creative strategies to support children, young people and their families whilst they wait to access services. And again, in some areas where work was stronger, there was successful monitoring, information and quality assurance processes to create better quality and timely EHC plans. So although lots of those things were strong in some areas, they were certainly weaker in others. So then if we go to some of those areas where there were the weaker practice, there was that unclear understanding of need and gaps in provision. So delays in responding to rising numbers and increasing complexity of cases, not assessing needs when commissioning services. So therefore there were those gaps in provision. And also poorly planned and managed transitions into different services also led to us seeing gaps in provision. And like we said, there was a lack of co-production in some areas. This would impact the quality of EHC plans with not capturing the voice of children and young people, and sometimes insufficient contributions from health and social care professionals, and lack of information use as well. So sometimes no effective joint strategic needs assessment in place. So often leaders didn't have the information that they needed to shape services around children and young people and make improvements, and therefore not using available data and information to make those decisions about commissioning. So I think, again, in areas where those things were stronger, we saw some really good examples of practice there. But equally, in areas where it wasn't so strong, some of those ended up with areas for priority action as well. I think that's the main sections around the slides from Tina. And then just to add as well, here we have a QR code. So if you scan it, you'll be able to see all of the reports we've referred to, as well as our updated framework, handbook. It's all on the Gov UK website as well. You can read all of our published Area SEND reports on the Ofsted website. And there's that QR code, and they will be shared with the presentation and obviously still accessible from the recorded version as well. Thank you. I think I'll pass over to Robbie for questions now.
Thanks to our presenters for talking us through those slides. We're on the Q&A section now, and thank you everybody for submitting plenty of really interesting questions for the panelists to consider. Some of those questions, I believe, have been answered by the information that the panelists gave you in the subsequent slides. So I'm going to prioritize the questions that I think haven't been covered off in the presentation. And I'll start with one about children at home. What impact will the changes have for parents of SEND children at home? And how can we find a summary to share with families?
I don't mind picking that one up, as other people have been covering for me. So in the full inspections, we sample cases of children and young people that are, for example, electively home educated or educated other than at school, and with the purpose of exploring the local area support and oversight of children that are not in school. So it is part of our full inspections, and also might be worth telling you about our current thematic inspection that we're doing. We're just coming to the end of that. That is totally focused on children who are not in school. We do 6 thematic inspections every year, and this year's is focused on children not in school. So we will be publishing a summary of our findings from that review later this year, and the previous reviews on children in alternative provision and preparation for adulthood, they're on the links that we've shared already in the QR code.
Thanks so much, Tina. I'm going to power through all of these questions straight on to the next one. This one concerns the SEND local offer. Specifically, how do we plan to make the SEND local offer more robust?
I'm happy to answer that one, Robbie. So our role is to inspect and report on the local area arrangements for children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities. We already focus on the impact and quality of the local offer during all the area SEND inspections. So, for example, we explore the extent to which the local offer is providing accurate and useful information to parents and carers and professionals and children and young people. And we do comment on this when appropriate in our inspection reports.
Thanks, Julie. That's really helpful. Straight on to the next one. Back to basics, I think, with this one, but how are local area partnerships held to account?
Thanks, Robbie. I'll take this one. So as you'll all know, that Ofsted and CQC, like we said, we're commissioned by the Department for Education to inspect the whole local area partnership as part of these inspections. And these, the focus of the area SEND inspections are to look at the outcomes and experiences for children and young people and result in a published report. All of the local areas are asked to publish a strategic plan outlining their work to improve the experiences and outcomes for children and young people with SEND, regardless of their outcome in terms of if it's typically positive experience, inconsistent, they have to publish that, or they have to show their strategic plan. But where those areas have systemic failings outcome, they do have to publish a priority action plan that Ofsted and CQC we will return to monitor. So that's when we go in for the monitoring visits. And so in addition to the full re-inspections, monitoring and engagement meetings will happen. Well, the engagement meetings will happen depending on the outcome, and both the Department for Education and NHSE also meet with local areas. In some cases, they issue statutory notices to improve, and they also support with monitoring and checking their improvements as well. So there's lots of different mechanisms for holding them to account.
Thanks, Jess. Really comprehensive there. Next one is an interesting one, perhaps for Tina. But how does the new framework evaluate whether schools are explicitly supporting the development of social and emotional skills?
Okay. Well, I mean, obviously the framework isn't new. Just as a reminder that we're kind of 2.5 years into this framework, but the review we've just done was around that constant identifying changes and improvements that we can make to the framework. So in the framework, we don't inspect and judge schools directly. They're part of the partnership, and we're focusing on the effectiveness of partnership working and that sort of system level impact, which kind of affects the capacity, I suppose, for schools in that area to support the development of social and emotional skills of children and young people. I mean, Ofsted is currently reviewing its school inspection framework right the way through from early years through to schools and post-16, and that sort of social and emotional skills will continue to feature in those frameworks.
Thanks, Tina. Moving straight on to the next question we've got here. We've got a question about whether there are any plans to include experts by experience. They would still be subject to the same training on the inspection team. Who would like to field that one?
I'll take that one, Robbie. So I think, like we've said in the presentation, all of our inspectors across Ofsted and CQC have SEND sector experience, and we also recruit part-time and current practitioners as well to ensure that we've got a really broad range of current experts to support with the inspection process from all elements kind of involved in the SEND system. All of these inspectors access comprehensive and very frequent training, and following the review, like we said, we're going to enhance this even more. So an example in terms of using experts by experience as part of this, we've engaged with a charity for children and young people with SEND, and they're actually going to be producing training for inspectors. So the children and the young people are going to be the ones training our inspectors on how they want to be spoken to when they're out on inspection, you know, hints, tips and tricks to engage, benefits of virtual versus in person. So all of that will actually be done by the children and young people themselves. So that's how we're including experts by experience as part of our training and ongoing work with inspectors.
Thanks so much for that, Jess. The next one is quite a popular question, actually. How do we make sure that the local authority or local area is discharging its duties in funding and delivering the provision in EHCPs?
I'm happy to take that one, Robbie. Apologies for my camera as well. So during our area SEND inspections, we often will sample the experiences of over 100 children and young people who have special educational needs and disabilities. Many of those have an education, health and care plan. We look at the lived experiences of those children and young people, including reviewing their individual education, health and care plans. We look at who's contributing and providing information in those plans. We look at if it represents children's individual needs and how they are accessing support and how that support's identified, how often it is reviewed, and also then how the local area monitors the quality of those education, health and care plans. We do report on this in our published reports and identify areas for improvement or priority actions where further work is required to better meet the needs of those children and young people.
Thank you, Julie. Moving on to the next question now. How can we help parents understand that staff are trained to deliver specialist provision and this doesn't have to come from external agencies?
I can come in on that one. I mean, schools are responsible for communicating clearly with parents about how the school is meeting those needs, how their staff are trained, and how they're providing that specific support or bringing in that specific support, and through the sort of school inspection framework, then that's where that would be sort of explored further. I suppose through the local offer, they must publish, the local area partnership must publish what support is available, what services are available, and equally that sort of clarification, which schools perhaps have that expertise as well. I think many offer parental workshops, and there should be that sort of clarification of different provision and pathways. And as I said, Ofsted will continue to evaluate sort of how well schools and local areas in the partnership are meeting those different responsibilities.
Thanks a lot, Tina. Julie, perhaps a good question for you here. Someone's asked whether the inspection will review adult health services and adult social care services in relation to young people with SEND and an EHCP who are over 18 years old.
Okay, thanks, Robbie. So all children and young people who have an education, health and care plan up to the age of 25 are in scope during the inspection. We choose 6 children and young people that we sample as part of what we call the case tracking exercise, and we do this prior to being on site on the inspection, and we will always include young people over the age of 18 years. And other inspection activities such as sampling, education, health and care plans, again, we always include those over 18. We look at their education, training, employment, health and social care needs, and that's key. They're key parts of us collecting that information about the young people's lived experiences and also their outcomes.
Thanks, Julie. That's great. A short, simple question here, but how do we work with parent carer forums?
I'll take that one, because we work really closely with the national network for parent carer forums and their sort of national members. I mean, they were absolutely key to being involved in really co-producing this framework and on particular aspects of the framework, surveys, things like easy read versions, different ways that we communicate, and we really value that relationship. We attend national conferences and events and local as well sometimes, wanting to provide that support in training, what to expect, how they can, what's expected of them during inspections. So in terms of sort of, I suppose, to add live on inspections, we will always, the lead inspector will always contact the local PCF, the national and other parent carer rep groups in that area, as soon as they notify, really, build those relationships, helping to sort of shape those lines of inquiries, get an understanding for the local area, and we meet with them throughout the inspection. They attend a range of different meetings, and as Jess was talking about earlier, engagement meetings, attending that as well. So a really key part of the inspection process and really strong working relationships.
Thanks a lot, Tina. And perhaps another one for you straight off the back of that one. How will inspectors look at EOTAS cohorts? So that's those receiving education other than at school.
Well, I mentioned, I think there was an earlier question, a sort of similar earlier question about those that are not in school. I mean, the framework includes meeting with officers that are responsible, for example, for those that are educated at home or educated other than at school, or those that are NEET, not in employment, educational training for older after young people with SEND. We always sample individual cases of children and young people to see what their experiences are. So as Julie said earlier, exploring that lived experience, speaking to children, young people and their families, the practitioners that support them, and that forms part of our focus sampling when we're on inspection, so that we can kind of triangulate that evidence, bring that together, and really getting understanding for children in that local area. And I mentioned the thematic earlier as well, about children not in school. I've already mentioned that one.
Thanks a lot, Tina.
Look out for that report.
Thanks a lot, Tina. We're almost timed out. I could possibly squeeze in one more if we could get maybe a quick answer to the following question. How does the updated framework ensure that young people are less traumatized while waiting for interventions or support? Can anyone come in quickly on that one before we wrap?
That's Jess.
I'll give a really quick answer. It's a really incredibly important question, because something we absolutely do look at. We are fully aware of long wait times in lots of areas for various services, and we do look at them and report on them. But a key part of what we do is explore the child's lived experience whilst they're waiting. What interventions are in place for them? What support is there if they're in an education setting? What therapy access are they getting? All of those elements we'll be looking at and report on as well. So we've seen some strong areas of practice where children get a really good offer whilst they're waiting for diagnoses perhaps, and in others where it's weaker, but we absolutely report on it.
That's brilliant, Jess, and thanks to our panelists for those answers to those questions, and thanks to everybody for submitting those questions. Really adds a bit of colour to these webinars, so thanks again. I'll hand back now to Claire to wrap us up.
Thanks so much, Robbie, and thanks everyone on the panel for answering those questions. And as Robbie said, thank you for attendees for first of all joining us, and certainly for submitting those questions as well. You can find the Care Quality Commission and Ofsted online and on social media, and there are details of those on the slides which you will receive after this session. So do look us up. So just thank you very much everyone for joining us, taking the time to do it. I know that it's tea time at home for lots of people, so really appreciate people coming along and joining us, and thanks again for those inputs into the review. It was really helpful. Take care everyone. Thank you.
Have a good evening.